A couple of the rules of professional conduct that I want to mention. The first one is it's a lawyer rule of attorney rule of professional conduct, Rule 32.8.2. And Section B of that provision says a lawyer who is a candidate for judicial office shall comply with the applicable provisions of the Code of Judicial Conduct. Now, it's not very specific about which provisions you have to apply to, but I'm going to go through some that I think potentially are ones that you should be aware of. And in the comments under Section 2, it says when a lawyer seeks judicial office, a lawyer shall be bound by applicable limitations on political activity, which is one of those specifically enumerated under the Code of Judicial Conduct. So when you apply, at least during that application process, I think you should be aware of what rules potentially apply to judges and assume they potentially apply to you. The second one I'm going to mention, this would be the rule Code of Judicial Conduct 51.4.3. And this rule says a candidate for appointment to judicial office may communicate with the appointing or confirming authority, including any selection, screening, or nominating commission or similar agency. So you have the ability to communicate with the appointing board. Section B is seek endorsements for the appointment from any person or organization other than a partisan political organization. So that leaves it pretty open. And I know there's been some people in the past that have had concerns if they've already been in a judicial appointment about going to private attorneys, and they think that potentially could come under another judicial rule of conduct. But 51.4.3 deals with activities when a candidate for appointed judicial office. Another one that I want to mention is Rule 51.3.7. This is a judicial rule. Participation in educational, religious, charitable, fraternal, or civic organizations and activities. And mainly this rule has to do with fundraising or soliciting contributions. And so when you're in the role of a judge, there's limitations on that. And you can understand why there would be limitations on that. So potentially this could still apply when you're in the application process. I don't think that it means that you would need to get out of whatever organization you belong to, but you may not want to participate in any of those activities during the period of time that you are an applicant in that process. Rule 51.3.8, appointment to fiduciary positions. A judge shall not accept appointment to serve in a fiduciary position such as executor, administrator, trustee, guardian, attorney-in-fact, or other personal representative except for the estate, trust, or person of a member of the judge's family. And so I don't know that you would need to, in the application process, get out of a role that you have at that point in time, but you may want to make sure that you don't do anything in that role that you wouldn't think a judge would want to do in a similar position. So I think you have to be aware of these provisions. Rule 51.3.11, a judge may not hold and manage investments of the judge and members of the judge's family. Rule 51.3.13, a judge or judge's spouse, a judge's domestic partner, or a judge's minor child shall not accept or solicit any gift or loan, bequest, benefit, or other thing of value if acceptance is prohibited by law that would appear to a reasonable person to undermine the judge's independence, integrity, or impartiality. Again, there's actually more provisions in there, some exceptions dealing with the relationship of kinship or marriage, but you should be aware, and I only think you have to be aware for a short period of time, but you need to be aware of what would apply if you're in a judicial position, and I think that's the question that you should be asking yourself. And then the last one that I want to mention is Rule 51.4.3. A candidate for appointment to judicial office may, I'm sorry, that's the one I already discussed. The last one I wanted to mention was the appointment to a governmental position. A judge should not accept appointment in a governmental committee, board, commission, or other governmental position unless this is one that concerns the law, the legal system, and the provision of legal services or the administration of justice. Again, you very likely could be in one of those positions at this point in time. A lot of lawyers fulfill these roles. I don't think you have to leave that role if you're an applicant, but I think you may want to skip a meeting or not be in the position of making any decisions on something that could adversely impact or give reason for an alleged impartiality at a later point in time. So those are rules that are applicable. We'll send those out. The last thing I want to do before I turn it over to Magistrate Tigas here is I do want to thank the Iowa State Bar Association for providing the seminar for free. The courts are very important, and anything that we can do to get information out, to get more applicants, get better applicants, to demystify the situation that applies in the application process, we want to do that, and we thank the Bar Association for making this available to everybody. Thank you. Magistrate Tigas.
Thank you. And so I guess out of all of the members that are on the panel, I should say that I kind of had it easy because obviously a magistrate, I find out the day that I interview whether or not I got the job. And so the process is obviously the same, that there is a written application, and then there is the formal interview in front of the committee, and then again the committee is the one that makes the decision. And so I don't have the long waiting time that comes with a district associate judge and then a district court judge. And so I guess I had it lucky. But so when I have gone through this process twice now, and so the first time was obviously back in 2013 when there was an opening for magistrate court here in Polk County. And then also I've just gone through the process in May because magistrates need to reapply every 4 years. And so I guess I'm kind of an old pro at it now. And so the first time I went through it, I definitely relied on being a public defender, and I prepped for it just like I would a trial, that I felt like I could not be more prepared. But then walking into the process, there's always going to be a surprise. And I think that's the same that anybody that has ever been in a trial would feel. And as a public defender, I had never appeared in front of a magistrate, and so was not exactly sure what exactly that role was. And so I felt like that was the most important thing for me initially, was to make sure that I knew what I was getting myself into, and particularly that in going in front of the panel, I would want to be able to answer any questions knowledgeably that the panel may ask me about my role as a magistrate. And so I talked to past and present magistrates before I actually had my interview. And I would say that that's definitely the most important aspect that I went through, is just knowing what exactly the job is that you're applying for. I sat through a couple of small claims, and then the actual written application process. When I picked up the written application, I did the forms, and then I put it away for a couple of days. I went back, I looked at the application again, put it away for a couple of days, went back and looked at the application again, because you never know what you're going to miss. It's just like with a resume. You don't want to send something in that possibly has a typo. You want to make sure your signature's on it. And so, and again, I'm very type A personality. That was how I felt comfortable doing, is that I looked over every single step with a fine-tooth comb. And then I guess what surprised me the most about the whole process was how much discussion is done in the courthouse. And I think anybody that is an attorney knows that lawyers talk, that judges talk. And I still remember when I was waiting for my interview, the first time I applied in 2013, and I was getting a drink out of the vending machine on the floor of the courthouse. And I had 3 people come up to me and say, "Oh, your interview's here in just a few minutes. Don't be late." And I'm thinking, how do they know this? I mean, that it still just surprised me. And then, well, we've heard that somebody has it in the bag. So just, cross your fingers and hope that it works out okay. And I did not expect that. And I think that to this day still surprises me very much how much discussion goes on outside of the panel, out of the committee. But obviously it worked well for me. But it is a kind of a daunting process, and I do feel like, especially the first time doing it, that you really don't know what to expect. And but again, I think the most important thing that I can pass along is just to be prepared. That it is an exciting process, and definitely I would encourage anyone that wants to go down the route to talk to others that have been through the process and get some feedback on what they should be doing. Thank you.
I'm Maria, and first I want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve on this commission. I've served since 2014, and it's been a very meaningful process, very meaningful service to me. I think we have the merit selection system, which is the best system in the country by and large, and it works. And so it's been a great opportunity, and I've gleaned a few things over the past few years of serving that I want to share with you. Some of them I've gleaned from being on the commission, and some of them I've gleaned from having close friends go through the process themselves and things that they've taken away from it and found successful or not successful. And I think you already heard maybe the 2 most important things that I want to pull out. That's right. It's personal reflection and investigation. If you're only thinking about applying as a judge for the first time when you see an email come across your desk that there's a vacancy, you may be a little bit behind already. And that's okay. That may be part of your process and your story. But that also may be why many applicants are not successful the first time around. So I'd say the first thing you need to do is take a lot of time to ask yourself the question, why do I want this job? Okay, I mean, if you're unhappy as a lawyer, that's probably not in and of itself a good enough reason right there. There may be other reasons why that pair itself with that reason, but that's probably not the only reason why you should be thinking about it. It's a different role. It's hard work and it's thankless work. It's a public service. So make sure that you're ready and able to really answer that question for yourself, for your family, and for the people of Iowa that you're going to be serving, because it's an important job. A couple answers I hear sometimes from that through that process is that I believe that being a judge is the pinnacle of a legal career, which if you end there isn't a terribly impressive answer. Many people say that, and this is just my opinion. In my mind, that answer, ending it there, sounds a little bit like you're making it about yourself rather than what you want to bring to, what your personal mission statement is and what you can contribute. So you can use that as a jumping off point, but I'd encourage you to maybe think a little bit more thoroughly about what you mean when you say that, if that's something you want to say. Another thing I hear a lot is, I want to be a judge because I can see both sides of any issue or any argument, and I think I can come to a reasoned conclusion. Also true. That should be maybe a baseline answer. But maybe if you went to law school, that should probably be true of all of your colleagues. So use that as a jumping off point, but maybe go a little bit more in depth. Really do some soul searching as to why that's a meaningful process to you. So aside from that personal reflection, take time to investigate, would I be a good long-term fit for this particular judicial vacancy? I can only speak as a member of the DAJ Magistrate Nominating Commission. I've never served on the other commissions. And certainly there's a variety of ways to view being a district associate judge or magistrate. And both are valid. One way is I would like to serve as long as I can, potentially become a full-time district court judge or appellate judge. So that's certainly a valid way to view the role. Another way to view the role is, this is a job I find meaningful. I've been in those courtrooms day in and day out, and that's a very powerful place for me, and I want to serve until retirement. I think that's also a very valid way to look at that particular job. In both instances, though, I think it's important to investigate what is going to be expected of you in that particular job and in that particular role. Because the reality of it is, it's not always a process that for sure lends itself to becoming, moving on if you would like to. So if you were not to move on, would you be happy in this role? That may be a question you need to ask yourself before you apply. And if not, that's your answer. Then you know, but you need to be fleshing those things out before you arrive at the interview. I think that's important. Part of that process is talking to close friends, colleagues, judges, both those you know who are not currently serving on the bench you're applying for, and, as Beth pointed out, those that maybe are currently serving who would be your future colleagues, even if you've never spoken to them before. I think that's very important. You should get to know the people that, get to know their insights, and use that as part of your process of determining whether you even want to apply. And then finally, I welcome talking to commissioners. I love to talk to anybody who is interested in the process or in applying before there's actually a vacancy. So if you're curious or you have questions about the process or about the role, or need more feedback if you've had an interview before, please reach out. At least me personally, I'm happy to talk to anybody. And I'm sure other commissioners would be as well. The interview process is really one-sided. It's not like a regular job. If you've been through the process, you know that already. It's not like a regular job where you can walk in and not only are you asked questions, but you can ask questions of the interviewers as well. That's why it's so important to do some of that work on whether you want the actual position before you walk into the interview process, because you won't get that opportunity with the interviewers who are sitting in front of you. So the third thing I would say in part of that investigation is, make sure you've given some thought about what's unique and personal to you. What makes you the person that you are, and what makes that a valuable asset to the people of Iowa, to the bar, and to your future colleagues. Give that some thought in your investigation process. I think that that'll give you a chance to really shine when you're asked these questions, because it's not a rehearsed scripted answer. It's just who you are, and you're able to answer that to the best of your ability because you've already given some thought to, who's currently on the bench? What is this role asking of me? What do my colleagues say about me? And how can I bring that out in an authentic, genuine way? Make sure you have plenty of examples or anecdotes. I think if the commission has met you before and this is the first time they're speaking with you, everyone is eager to meet you and to get to know you, but it's really hard to do that in 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes the best way to do that is through an example. You don't necessarily, if you don't have an opportunity to bring out an example orally with the commission, make sure that anybody who is writing you recommendations, which is also pretty important, or making phone calls on your behalf, they have those examples ready. It's nothing that's manufactured. It's just authentic to who you are. It's your reputation, and it's something that all the commissioners want to know. So I would say those are some of my takeaways just from my experience.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Tom Levis. I'm on the Judicial Nominating Commission for District 5C, which is Polk County. And I've been on this commission for 4 years. And in the 4 years, we've picked 7 new judges. When I went on the commission 4 years ago, I thought I'd be lucky to get 1 or 2, and we've chosen 7. And I'm told by Judge Gamble that we'll have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 in the next couple of years. It's been a really rewarding experience for me, to be honest with you. And I'm going to talk to you about some basics that you may already know, and if you do, just close your eyes and take a little snooze. But the judicial nomination commissions are composed of 11 people, 5 lawyers who are selected by their peers. For instance, in Polk County, the lawyers will have an election every few years, and they'll elect people to be on the nomination commission. There's 5 lawyers. There are 5 lay people who are selected by the governor, and then the 11th person is the chief judge, which in our case is Judge Gamble. Interestingly, some of the lay people are lawyers. Not always, but sometimes they are. For instance, Ryan Koopmans, who was with an iMaster firm, was on the commission with us. I think he was on the commission when Judge May was selected. And just so that you know, I was on the commission when Judge May was selected, and I'm delighted to tell you he's been a good one. He was a good one for us. But anyway, there's 11 people on the commission. The commission is required to be gender balanced. Politics may play a little role in the selection of the lay people, but it doesn't. I don't think it does for the lawyer members. And when you get in the commission and you're actually doing the process, politics doesn't play a role at all. I've not seen that at all. I will tell you that I have been contacted by trial lawyers who say, I want to have more trial lawyers on the bench. I've been contacted by general practitioners who say, we want to see more people with varied backgrounds on the bench, more transactional type of lawyers to give us some variation at the courthouse. You hear things like that all the time, but in terms of politics, Republican, Democrat, nothing. Well, it's never come up. Just for your own edification, the 5C or our Judicial Nomination Commission, the 5 people that are on it, that are lay people, one's a woman named Tina Shaw. She's very nice. She is used to work for Governor Reynolds. And her husband is a Republican politician. Marvis Landon is married to a Republican legislator. Nicole Crane works for the Association of Business and Industry and is involved in the Republican portion of that organization. Tom Bernau is a lawyer who doesn't practice much anymore, but he's a Republican. So you can see that there are Republicans involved, and that there's a 5th member that's a lay person, and his name is Steve Bowl, and he's married to Carmen Bowl, who's pretty active in the Republican Party. So you can see where the governor picks people that are Republicans that look the way and feel the way that he does or she does. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think it makes any difference. When we talk about it in our commission meetings, we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about Republican or Democratic things. The lawyer members on our 5C commission are me, Jake Firehelm, who's a criminal defense lawyer, Angie Schutz, who does a lot of dissolution marriage, Brooke Timmer, who does a lot of employment law, and then we have a vacancy, and there'll be an election coming up right after the first of the year for somebody to replace one of the lawyer members. If you decide that you want to try out for this job, there is a local rule in Polk County that I don't think that is used around the state, and that is the candidates can't talk to the commissioners, and the commissioners can't talk to the candidates once a position has been posted by the court. So once there's been a posting that says you can now apply to be a district court judge, you can't talk to the commissioners except at the interview. Most other districts, I think, do it differently than that. Polk County has done it that way for many years, and it's very controversial. It comes up, and every time we get ready to make a new selection, but the rule has never been overruled, and so that's the way it is. And so to get around that rule, what you do is that you contact the commissioners before the position is posted. So I get calls from candidates all the time who say, can I come buy you coffee or have lunch with you or whatever and tell you a little about myself, which is great, and I think all the commissioners appreciate that. I think they appreciate that very much. So I would encourage you to do that. But once the position is posted, I can't talk to you and you can't talk to me. Having lawyers call commissioners, having other lawyers call commissioners and touting your successes and why you'd be a good judge, I think is a great idea. But in my experience, there's only about 7 or 8 of them that do it, and you hear them from the 7 or 8 people every time. I don't know that that's such a significant thing. I do think, and Maria talked about this a little bit, but I think the one thing that you can do to really help yourself with the commission is to go around and talk to other judges. What's it like? What am I getting myself into? And Judge May, I'm sure, is going to tell you about that. But we want to hear that because we'll have candidates that will come and say, we've never talked to any judges or anybody about this. And we're like, ooh, I don't know if they know what they're getting into. But those that tell us that they've been and talking to other judges, they come across better. I can just say that to you. An interesting thing that happened in one of our interviews, and I'll tell you, it was Judge Porter. This has been a while or 2 ago, but Judge Porter when he first applied, and I may have this a little bit wrong, but I don't think so. When he first applied, one of the things that he was concerned about, he even expressed it to the commission, was, I've been a criminal prosecutor for many years, and my writing skills may not be up to speed. We don't have to write a lot of briefs. We don't have to do a lot of writing. We're in the courthouse. We're doing things every day. And so what Judge Porter did, and what was very impressive to, I think, the commission, we talked about it quite a bit, was he joined a writing group, and where once a month they get together and they write stories, and short stories and long stories, and they practice writing skills and the like. And we were all impressed by that he was willing to go out and take the extra effort to learn some skills that will be helpful for him on the bench. And I talked to him the other day and asked him if that was still, he said, I'm still in the writing group. It's been a great deal, and it's been really helpful for me. Letters of recommendation. You know, when you apply, everybody sends letters of recommendation to the commissioners. It's great. If you send letters from just people in your office, it's probably not as impressive as if you get it from a whole vast variety of places. So if you're in the county attorney's office and you send nothing but county attorney letters, that's probably not that impressive to the commissioners. So get a whole host of them. Sometimes volume. I mean, sometimes the last time we did one, I think I got like 80 some letters of recommendation for one candidate, which is a lot. And it's hard. I mean, and they all kind of say the same thing. So I don't know how impressive that is, but you get, you know, 7 or 8 or 10 good letters of recommendation from good, solid people who will tell us what it is, that why you should be a good judge. I think that's the way to do it. Make sure that people that are writing letters of recommendation for you know when the deadline is. The last time we were making picks, we were getting letters of recommendation while we were actually in the commission meetings. And I got several of them after the meeting was over, after we'd already made our selections. So make sure your people know. What should the letters say? Well, they ought to tout your skills as a lawyer, your intellect. They ought to tout your writing skills. They ought to tout your personality and your ability to get along with other lawyers and judges. Your ability to be a team player. That's a big deal at the courthouse. I know, you know, Magistrate Tickets would talk about that, so would Judge May. The involvement in civic and charitable organizations, I think that tells a lot about you. So I would do that. And the other thing is that life experiences. One of the things that Judge Gamble, he was appointed when he was 30, so he's been on the bench a long time. And every once in a while, we'll have a young candidate who will say, well, now, you know, do you think you've had enough life experiences to, you know, to be a district court judge? And the candidate will say, they'll look right at Judge Gamble and say, well, he was only 30 when he got appointed, you know. And Gamble will say, you're exactly right. And, you know, maybe I could have used a few more life experiences before I got on the bench. So tell some stories about life experiences, things that you think that you can bring to the table, bring to the bench, and help you in decisions and resolving disputes for people. You know how to fill out the application. I don't need to tell you that. And in the writing samples, we do read them all. We read all the applications, and we read them very carefully. The interview in front of the commission, it lasts 15, 20 minutes. You come into the room, there are 11 of us sitting around the table, and you get to sit in the hot seat, and Judge Gamble says to you, or whoever the chief judge will be, will say to you, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, give us a little opening statement. And so be prepared to do that and to be able to talk for 5 or 10 minutes about why you want to be a judge. Opening statements, I'm telling you, most of the people are pretty nervous. And they ought to be. I mean, it's a life-changing experience for you. They ought to be nervous. So don't be worried about that. Notes or no notes in front of you. Some people don't have notes in front of them. Some do. I don't think it makes any difference to the commissioners. The interview is obviously very important to the decision process. But the truth is, you know, some people are just naturally good speakers and you know, good closing argument people, and I don't think that's the thing that's going to make or break your case. Tell us about yourself, where you grew up, about your family, where you went to school, any awards that you got, order of the coif, law review, things like that are important for us, because that means that we know we've got pretty bright people who can handle the intellectual issues associated with being a judge. We want to hear about what kind of practice you got, interesting cases that you've handled or been involved in, kinds of experiences you've had practicing law, involvement in civic and charitable organizations, and of course why you think you'd be a good judge and why you set yourself aside from everybody else, why you think you'd be really good. Questions, we do ask questions. Not everybody asks questions. I'm going to go through a few of them that have been asked recently. Judge Gamble is classic for asking questions that are kind of head scratchers, but he'll ask questions about, well, you've got somebody in front of you now on a criminal case, and it's time to set the bail. How do you do it? What factors do you take into account for setting bail? Well, people that that are divorce lawyers or whatever may not know that. So be prepared for questions about other areas of law that maybe you're not involved in. People will ask questions like this. Tell us about some time when you've collaborated with some other person or persons and how it worked out, so that we know whether you can be kind of a team player or not. What if a lawyer appears in front of you and he or she is disrespectful to the other lawyer or the judge? How do you handle it? Those are the kinds of questions that we seem to ask in our interviews. We have somebody on our commission who asks this question every time. What's the best case or best event that ever happened to you in your life? You had that, I'm sure. And what's the worst? What's the worst? And what did you learn from it? Closing, after people have asked questions, the Judge Gamble will say, okay, do you want to close up and give us a little summary, and so that's usually meaning take 2 or 3 minutes to just kind of sum up where you are, and then out the door you go. And I can tell you that after we've interviewed everybody, what we do on the commission is that we sit around and talk about every one of the candidates. We go through everybody, we go through their pros and their cons, their ups and downs. And you can kind of tell there's like last time I think we had 16 applicants, and the 4 or 5 kind of rose to the top. We kind of knew who they were, and then we talked more about that. And then what we do in terms of our voting, we vote once, and if you get 6 votes, which is more than half, then you're selected as one of the candidates. And then we turn right around, we throw everybody back into the pool, and we vote for the other candidates, and whoever gets 6, that's the second one. Generally speaking, it doesn't take us very long to do the voting, maybe 5 minutes or so. But the last time, Toby was there, but the last time we were there doing it, it took us probably 30 minutes. And we went through several ballots before somebody got 6. We had a lot of good candidates that time. In terms of rumors and gossip and stuff about how we do it and what we do in I don't know how anybody would really know that. I really don't. I mean, because we don't really get too serious about it. We talk about it during breaks and lunch. We get together and go to lunch and stuff, but we do talk about it. But I don't think anybody's making any decisions until the actual 11th hour, which is usually about 5:30 in the day. Again, politics doesn't seem to play a role in it at all, but I can tell you that once the commission has picked you, you have to turn your focus around, and Judge May will tell you this, I know, to be political. You've got to get the political people involved to call the governor and get the governor involved. The gatekeeper, from my understanding right now for Governor Reynolds is Ryan Koopmans, and was with the Nymaster firm, and I know he looks at all the candidates that are sent up there, and he looks at the resumes and looks at the applications before the governor ever does, and then talks to the governor about it. But I do know the governor interviews, and Ryan has told me personally that the governor will sometimes say, I think I'm going to go a different way than what you think. So we'll see. Anyway, I'll be happy to answer any other questions, but with that, I'm going to leave it to Judge May.
Thank you for your patience while I try to deal with the microphones. I'm Judge David May. I appreciate your time and attention today. This is an honor to be able to talk about this process. It's extraordinarily important process to all the judges that I know. We're very interested in making sure that we get strong team players, as Tom mentioned a couple of times. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit is just a theory of how to address this process, not so much the procedural details, but thinking about it broadly. And some of this will be redundant, but since I'm talking to lawyers, I'd like to talk about litigating your case. And I think there are two main phases to the case that you're trying to make for being a judge, and that is evaluating your case. Am I really a good candidate? Is this the time for me? And then it's proving your case. Evaluating your case, I think, is really three things to think about. One, learning about the job. Two, examining your motives. And three, thinking about what you can contribute. Learning about the job, you already know a lot about the job or else you wouldn't be interested in it, but there's always more to learn, and that's something I definitely learned as I was going through, as you say, a soul-searching process to try to think, am I actually a legitimate person to be trying to do this, or am I crazy for thinking I'm a good person for this? And you know, one of the best things that I could do was go and meet with judges and talk to them and find out what they like about their job, find out what they think the challenges are, find out what they think the best qualities are in a judge, and find out what they hope for in future colleagues. So I think that's just an extremely valuable process, and I guarantee you that, I'll just speak for Polk County in particular, that if you email or call any of those judges, that they'd make time for you to talk about those things. The second thing is examining your motives, and I think you hit on this appropriately. There are good reasons to be a judge, and there are bad reasons to be a judge, in my view. If it's sort of retiring to the bench so you can drink coffee and let the clerks do all the hard work, that's probably not the best motive for being a judge. If your motive is that you want to work hard to try to contribute something towards the strength of our bench, towards the strength of our community, the strength of our state, that's a pretty good motive. So I think that process of, as Darth Vader said, searching your feelings about what you're really doing is a good process. And then thinking about what it is that you can contribute. I mean, do you like to go and learn a different area of law daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be? Do you like getting in and working on a research project or a writing project? And what experiences do you bring to the bench? Obviously, your experiences as a lawyer are extremely significant. What about your experiences as a parent or a spouse or a sibling or a daughter or a son, a community leader, running a business or being involved in your agencies? Maybe it's that minimum wage job that you had when you were 17, because you can learn some good things there that are important. How can you bring all those experiences to bear to be the kind of decision maker that we need in Iowa? Really doing some soul searching about those things. And ultimately what you can bring to the judicial team. And if your search leads you to believe that you would be a good candidate, then it's time to move to the second phase, and that's proving it. And that's showing it not only to the commission, but ultimately to the governor, because they have a tough job. They are working on relatively limited information to entrust people with extremely serious decisions. And so what are you going to do to show that you are, in fact, a good person for that job, to be entrusted with that responsibility? I'm just going to mention three pieces in particular. The application. Obviously, you want to provide full and complete answers and make sure you read the questions and actually answer the questions. But look, I think this is your opportunity to take all those insights that you just gained in phase one about yourself and why you're a good candidate, and to work those into your application and to show it. Here's a case that I worked on, and here's what I learned from that case. And that's how, and here's what I take away from that and what I'll bring to the bench because of this case that I worked on, etc. And I would really encourage you to take seriously the advice given about working hard on the application. This is your opportunity to shine in paper. And if you're not really willing to put in the time and the energy on the application, I think it would be harder for a commissioner or the governor to say, you know, that you're ready to put in the time and energy required to make the tough decisions that we're entrusted with. So I just encourage you to really lay out some time for that. The letters of recommendation, I guess I would think of them as opportunities to prove your case again, sort of like witnesses for you, aren't they? Are you hardworking? Well, maybe there's someone who's a colleague or a client or somebody who works with you on a board who could write a letter and talk about how hardworking you are. Are you fair and reasonable? Well, maybe there are people like opposing counsel, for example, who could say, you know what, I worked with Joe or Jill and they worked hard for their client, but they're reasonable and fair and a straight shooter, and I'd be okay with them deciding a case if I were involved. You know, are you involved in your community? Are you interested in your community? Well, I'm sure you have neighbors or people on boards who could say, this is somebody who's really trustworthy and interested in helping out. So things to think about. And then the interview process, you know, Tom has already explained it and others have explained it as well. Obviously, you want to think about questions that you can expect. But at the same time, what I've found and what I've heard is that there'll always be some curveballs out there. And if you can go into that interview process and try to relax to the best of your ability, try to breathe, try to show yourself as the kind of person that can receive a curveball and deal with it, just as judges have to receive curveballs and deal with those in real time. I think that would be my strategy, at least. I guess two last points that I'd like to mention about this process, and that is that there is a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of work that goes into being a judge, but there is a great deal of reward. This is a real dream job for me and continues to be 2 years later. And for the right person, it can be a fantastic opportunity to serve. And I guess I would just end by, again, inviting anybody who's interested in this process further to come down to the courthouse, meet with the judges and magistrates. My email is david.may@iowacourts.gov, and anybody who's interested in the judicial process that would like to sit down and talk to me, I would be happy to make time for you if you'd like to email me. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. We'd be happy to take questions now, and anybody that's on the line can go ahead and send the question in, and Christy will provide that information. Do we have any questions from anybody that's out here that's with us live? And we have a comment that I'm going to read in just a minute that came in. So this is from Jeffrey Britton. He served on the Judicial Nominating Committee for the 7th Judicial District. He said they placed much weight on diversity of experience. However, they also place quite a bit of weight on poise. The candidates who came across as composed and confident fared better than the others as a general rule. So this is just some additional information that's being provided to you. And I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. It kind of relates to that. So and some of you talked about it, and it has to do with experience. So when you're looking at candidates, you're going to get candidates that have experience only in one area. How does that impact you, and what else is it that they can have on their resume or that they can say to you that will justify to you that they will be able to do a job in all of the areas that they need to practice in? So this is probably primarily for Tom and Maria.
It's going to vary by person, and that is to say life experience is one, and in addition, what have you done to make up for that fact? Are you self-aware enough to know that about yourself, and be able to come up with examples as to what have you done in your life that makes you be able to handle that? And another thing is, give me examples of how you've handled getting cases or situations or issues that you've never seen before, and how you handled that. Give me a trail. How did you work through that? That's going to be the best indicator of how you would behave and manage your work going forward. So that's what I would say.
Well, this comes up, at least with the district court nomination commissions. We'll get candidates that have kind of limited experiences. They've done a lot of criminal work, or they've, done a lot of family law work, or they've done some, but they haven't done a lot of different things. But they're lawyers. They've been trained to do all sorts of different things. They may have just focused on one area now, but over the time, but originally they were trained to do it. And so what we like to hear, at least on our commission, is that when somebody comes in and we'll say, this happens all the time, because we know that a ton of what judges do at the courthouse are family law related. And a lot of these people won't have any experience in family law. But if you're a candidate and you say, I've been down there and I've talked to the family law judges. I've talked to them. I've talked to some of the family law lawyers. I've gone to a couple of seminars to bring myself up to speed on that. That's like music to the ears of a commissioner to hear that you've done that. If you just say, well, I think I can do it, that maybe you probably can, maybe, but it's sure nice if you can say to the commission, I've actually researched that and done a little investigation, and this is. I'm convinced that I can handle that, and that's the case for if you have never done a criminal case or some certain kinds of civil cases. So that would be my thought about it anyway.
So I have a question for Judge May, and I'm going to ask Magistrate Tiggis to also answer this one. And you indicated it's a dream job for you. What do you find most gratifying about being a district court judge or magistrate?
I think that the opportunity for public service, number one, in general, is fantastic, and more specifically, the opportunity to help resolve disputes for people and in a way that is orderly and according to law, and that is at least as civil as we can make it. And that feeling of satisfaction that each day that you're working forward, maybe you're not going to ultimately resolve all of their problems. Maybe these people just need to get through this divorce, for example, but at least you've moved the ball forward. Maybe they have an ongoing dispute, and often they will. And for example, a modification issue will come up. And when you're able to bring at least a temporary piece to that situation, that's extremely rewarding. The other part of it, from a personal perspective, is that we get such an extraordinary variety of legal and factual issues to deal with. Criminal issues, family law issues, PCRs, administrative issues, the whole gamut of civil issues. For somebody who enjoys learning new things, that is inherently rewarding. That ongoing process of continuing to learn new aspects of the law and apply them to new problems. So.
Thank you.
And I guess I would start out by, personally, I would agree with Judge May that I just really enjoy hearing something different every single day. I mean, my first small claim that I had was over a dog, where these people had actually shared the dog for 3 years, and then the relationship went south, and they wanted me to basically come up with a custody agreement over this dog. And it still surprises me every day what comes through my courtroom. And I know this is going to probably sound a little silly, but I guess I just, and even with just small claims, I understand that when people are walking into my courtroom, it may be the only time that they have had a touch with the legal system, and that I feel a responsibility that while they're not both going to walk out, both parties are not going to walk out happy, that somebody's going to be upset. And I think one of the things that still surprises me about small claims is how many families I see where there's a family member suing another family member over something. And that even that I understand that there's still, even if I award the plaintiff or defendant, that they're still not walking out happy. There's still going to be a family rift amongst them, and it's not going to be a happy Thanksgiving. I've said that many times to people, but that I feel that deep responsibility that it's my job to explain the legal system to them, and that what I've learned is that they really just want to be heard. I mean, everybody just wants to tell their story, and that they just really want somebody to say, you know, I understand, but I'm sorry. This isn't what I can do for you today. And so I do say that it's the greatest job. It really is. I mean, I didn't go to law school till I was 30, and it still just, it amazes me that I still get to come to work every day and have this job. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. This one's for Tom and Maria. Should one apply for a judicial position if he or she has been reprimanded by the Supreme Court? If so, how should it be handled?
Yeah, I can take that. We've actually had candidates who have had issues with the Supreme Court, you know, and the ones that were the most successful dealing with it came right out front. You know, if you had to wait for Judge Gamble to ask the question, it didn't come out quite as well. But if they came right out and said, you know, I had this experience 15, 20 years ago or whatever it was, and that this is what happened, I've got my life in order and everything else, and this is the kind of practice I've had since then, that's the way to do it. But I mean, it's the truth is, it'll be, if you've had a problem with the Supreme Court, you'll have a tough time getting selected, I think.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Tom said. I think the best way to handle it is to explain it out front. Don't let it come out, because the commissioners will have that information already, so you're not going to hide it. If your application does not match up with the records that the Office of Professional Development has on file, that could be a problem too for you, because that could suggest that either you're not thorough or you are not forthcoming. So all of those that's the most important, is honesty is the best policy.
I've got two questions I'm going to try to squeeze in. The first one is just for Judge May. So if you can, I'm going to ask you to keep it short. I think you probably can. After the political process of the governor's selection, did you find further political pressure while on the bench?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this is, I think all four of you can answer this, but we're limited on time. I've got 3 minutes, so keep them quick. And this will be our last question. Can judges give letters of recommendation? And if so, what is your experience and how willing they are to give a recommendation? And why don't I, yeah, Tom, why don't you go ahead?
I don't think judges can give letters of recommendation. At least I'm not getting them. I didn't think you could.
I've not seen one. And I wonder if it's a judge in another county or state, if that would be different. But I would err on the side of caution with that.
But I guess I would add that they can be references. And so if you really have a judge that has a strong opinion, then ask them to be a reference.
Okay, and I've got 2 minutes, and one more question came in. How much weight does the chief judge have in the decision versus the other members of the commission? So this would be to you, Tom.
No more than any of the other commissioners. And interestingly, you know, when the process starts out, the lawyers do kind of know who the candidates are, and the judge, of course, knows who the candidates are, and the lay people do not. But they learn, they get educated, and by the end of the day, when we're talking about voting, they're as educated about who the candidates are as are the lawyers. They're very active and involved.
Well, I want to thank everybody for signing up and attending this, and I just think it's great. And we have some people here, and if you will help me thank the panel for giving their time and coming here, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.